Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today. I know it's busy time of year, busy day. Thanks to everyone in particular who's tuned in from Hort Connections. We're going to get started for what we hope is the first of several variety overviews. So, just for some quick housekeeping for everyone who's here right now, if you have a question, chat and video are off. So if you could just pop it into the Q&A, that's the one at the bottom with the question mark and the thought bubble. And as we go, we'll have some breaks to answer questions. So for everyone's awareness, this webinar is being recorded and will be sent out to registered attendees after it's been uploaded to the Berries Australia Resource Library. And so what I would like to do is to just give you a brief overview of the webinar. It'll be split into two parts. The first will be an introduction to California Berry Cultivars' program and how they run. Then we'll have a brief stop for any questions you have about those logistics, anything you're really curious about how a breeding program runs, any of the breeding questions that might pop up. And then we will be going over the different varieties that are currently available here in Australia. So, without further ado, I'm very excited to introduce Kyle Vanden Langenberger. He is the head research and development officer and the head breeder of California Berry Cultivars. He has been for the past 10 years since they were founded. He is my former boss, so please be nice to me. And he has a lot of knowledge and resources to share with all of you. So I'm going to pass the floor on to Kyle, and thank you once again for taking this time with us, Kyle.
All right, great. Thanks. Thanks for having me, Sandy. So I don't know if can people see me or just my nice background right now, probably, right? Um,
We can see you.
oh, you can see me.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll keep going in case anybody wants to get to know what I look like. Um, let's go ahead and get this going though. So as Sandy said, um, my name's Kyle Vanden Langenberg. I'm the director of research and development at California Berry Cultivars. I thought I'd kind of do this in two parts today, really. Some because there's some people who are interested in kind of the company, CBC, and kind of what we do, the process of it. So that's going to be part one. And after that, I'll take just a quick little break, let anybody ask any questions about it that they want. And then kind of part two will be all about the varieties that we have here in California, but also available through the Tulane Group in Australia. So let's see here. So where did this all begin? So back in the early 2010s, a couple of guys, Doug Shaw and Kirk Larson, who some of you may know were the former breeders at UC Davis, they kind of came to the conclusion that it was time to set up a company like ours in order to better serve um, the development of products to solve growers' problems. And for those of you who don't know them personally, you probably do know some of the products they developed, things like Camarosa, Albion, San Andreas Fronteras, and I understand now in Australia, Cabrillo as a fairly popular product. So the goal back then was to kind of continue this long legacy that the University of California has had in population development. So basically, the first thing they did is they came up with this idea, and then they hired a guy like me, um, and that started in 2015. So when I got here in 2015, um, this is basically what it looked like. You know, the original staff was me, two farm managers, a couple technicians, and a foreman and some field crew. And this is actually I actually really like this picture because these are two products. One of them in particular, I think that has a good place in Australia. This little plastic house right here was the temporary one we set up in 2015. And we germinated the seeds that would eventually become Adelanto and Belvedere. So we like the history of that photo. And of course, the one on the bottom is the location where we discovered Alturas. Um, so from there, if you kind of fast forward 10 years, you know, this is more CVC today. You know, the company is growing. the vision that Doug and Kirk set out, we've grown quite large from that. And now if you go to just one of our sites, like in Oxnard, which here you can see the field day that we just had there in March, we had over 100 attendees. They toured our 6-acre facility there, the greenhouses, the rating facilities. We showed off a bunch of experiments. We're running a very large, like 1-acre agronomy trial there right now, to show off things like plastic treatment, fertility treatments, and how those things affect our varieties. So in Oxnard, we have a research manager, a couple research technicians, site foreman, 3 field technicians, and again, all these facilities. And this story kind of uh, repeats itself, I guess, as we go forward. And we just had a very successful field day in Watsonville, where we had over 150 attendees. The UC A&R now is actually taking part in this field day, and so is Cal Poly. So we had invited guest speakers. They talked about things like Alturis's chill requirements, because they're doing quite a bit of studies on this now in California. And here, this site, some of you who have been to California or are familiar with the old UC Davis program know it. This is the site on Dairy Road. It's the same exact location that Cabrillo was developed at, and we ended up taking it over. And now this is the site where we do all of our day neutral research. So from there, we have kind of like the mothership in Central California. And this is an important operation for us, particularly in regards to our ability to bring products to a market like Australia. So it is at the same time the site of our breeding operation in regards to population development, but at the exact same time, it's also where we do all of our clean stock and clean stock nursery management. So when we make meristem tubes, this is the location where this comes from, so that way we can import it under quarantine into Australia. And up here, we're running a full-fledged business. So we have like an operations manager that runs the nursery. We have a chief administration officer and a business advisor. There's actually 2 research farm managers. And something I'm going to talk a little bit about later is our research in pathology. And I'll talk a little bit about what our lead pathologist is up to. And again, all the support staff. So then recently, we actually all just recently expanded into Spain, and formed a fully owned subsidiary called California Berry Cultivars International. I guess we're not exactly the most creative people with the names, but now we're running a site here. And this is actually really important, because it allows us to have 3 distinct populations around the world, which allow us to adapt our genetics to like more of these environmental conditions. Spain, Huelva, Spain is very different than Oxnard, California, or Watsonville, California. And the production is different, the farm practices are different, but so is the environment. And this is allowing us to like adapt our germplasm in these environments for like multiple uses. And this is a big expansion of our research program, essentially. And over there, because of this and the seriousness of this, we've actually hired another plant breeder, and given him the title of the Director of International Research and Development. And again, there's all the support staff and the facilities over there to do this. So if you kind of go back though, when this all began, Doug needed to find a group of partners. Doug and Kirk needed to find a group of partners to begin. And they began this with some big companies in California. So kind of like down the list here, just in order, California Giant is one of the large members of CBC. They're a very large international berry company that specializes in all the berry categories. They have over 3,000 acres at least of strawberries in California, with expanding operations in Florida and Mexico. And then Gempack, they're also a very large international strawberry company. They've got about 5,500 acres now in California, and almost 5,000 in Mexico, and 1,000 in Florida. And it was important that our membership also represent medium-sized and small growers. So we also have members, the Darren Berries group, which is about 1,000-acre medium-sized shipper out of California. And then small growers like Rod Coda, who is a predominantly 20-acre organic grower. And we'll kind of circle back to how our company tries, and we think succeeds, trying to serve needs of growers like Rod's, or these organic growers, who really haven't had products developed specifically for them ever. And then, of course, we have a master licensee all over the world through Eurosemias, but in Australia, our products are represented by Tulangi. So this is kind of the combined largest berry group in California, actually. And this is the group that CVC is managed and owned by. So when we set this all up, the first thing you have to do is define breeding objectives. And there's a lot of them, of course, but it's important to define them. So we've defined them into basically three large categories. We have things like production, we have quality things, and environmental tolerances. So under production, it's obvious things like yield, earliness, and harvest efficiency, or the ability to pick through a crop, an acre or a hectare of a crop, an efficient manner, so that way we're maximizing our labor costs. So we study that and the genetic relationship of it. The quality metrics are always things like the shippability and how it relates to firmness, the size, and how that relates to how many fruit does it take to fill a clamshell, and flavor, of course, and the Brix component of it, as well as appearance, because appearance is one of the things that consumers buy with. They buy a lot with their eyes, so we breed very heavily to make sure we have evenly colored fruit that's highly glossy. And then environmental tolerance is really is a catch-all. It's this concept of having rusticity in a plant, but really it's disease resistances to multiple soil-borne and fungal diseases, pest resistances, and things like insects, as well as tolerance to rain for any of the markets that suffer really badly for rain during the fruiting season. So we take these objectives that we have and we apply them to the target markets that we have. And because we try and serve the markets all over the world, if these markets are the short day markets, things like Southern California, Southern Europe, places in Australia. And again, the big traits we go for in these are things like early total yield for the short days as well, because of how it affects the freezer crop at the end. High quality is very important in all of them. In things like day neutrals, we really do try and focus on the evenness of the yield over time, so that way we're not having spikes in it. We also breed very heavily for the summer plant type, or this concept in some markets where they plant a day neutral plant from a frozen plant in a freezer instead of a live plant. And this requires a very strong day neutral type. So we focus very heavily on breeding these because it's an important market in places like Northern Europe. It's an important market here in California and other places around the world. So we have products that serve this. We'll talk about at the end as well. And of course, we're doing work now in protected culture. So we're doing trialing work and actually growing quite successfully Belvedere in a hydroponic system. And we're doing trialing work all the way in aeroponics with some of these aeroponic companies you might hear about on the news, to understand whether or not there's a genetic component to being able to be successful in those systems. And of course, we believe there is. So those things with the target markets, with all the resources we have and the objectives that we have, how do we accomplish this goal? And the way that we accomplish it is we conduct plant breeding. So the first thing we do in plant breeding is we conduct controlled crosses. And to date, we've created about 2,000 individual families and done something like 20,000 hand pollinations, my staff tells me, which sounds like a lot. And we've processed something like 6 million seed. So this is a photo here of Tata Chandy performing crosses in one of our crossing greenhouses. So this is where it all begins. Every year we select parents. We begin like a big crossing block. We make crosses in multiple locations actually and do this work all over the world. And we germinate these things out and we grow big, huge, large seedling populations with them. And in those seedling populations, and again, we have 3 populations every year, because we have one in the south in Southern California that's focused on the short day genetics. We have one in the north that's focused on day neutral genetics. And we have one in Huelva, which is focused on the genetics and the adaptability of them to the Mediterranean climate. So to date, we've screened something like 250,000 different genetic individuals. And this really is a size increase compared to the UC Davis program of about 33%, because of the importance of having that additional population in Spain that we work with. So once we rate these seedling fields, the next thing we do is we make our selections out of them. We take a subset of them based on quality metrics to our various testing locations around the world. Again, there's 3 of them: Oxnard, Watsonville, and Huelva, Spain. And to date, we've screened about 24,000 unique individuals. And this allows us, by screening such large numbers, and I'll kind of go over the data we take while we're screening these things. This allows us to make quite a bit of population improvement all at once in a diverse set of traits, which I'm also going to show you. So again, this is a runner trial in Watsonville. And this is the location, Dairy Road, which has been the location basically since you got Diamante. So it's been there since 1983, and we continue to work there today. And we really love this location, and we hope to be able to continue using it for a very long time. So like I said, we focus on these traits, and one of those traits is size. And we actually have this product in Australia, CVC 18. And yes, that's a single fruit that we picked out early in the season. The dime is actually teared out of that, so it is a 124-gram fruit. I think more interestingly, though, and it would be a question I maybe even have for the Australian market, um, the picture on the left is actually a selection from this year. So we've put a lot of pressure on size breeding in our program because of the effect it has on labor cost in California. And as we've done this, there doesn't seem to be a size ceiling. So this is actually a selection that's averaging in probably the first 6 or 7 picks over 100 grams per berry. And obviously we're starting to wonder if this isn't getting too big, but I'll take feedback on that from the group, I guess, at the end if anybody has some. So then from there, we of course look at appearance. This is a picture of Belvedere from Oxnard's rating shed. Belvedere we love, again, because of its appearance, its glossiness, its flavor. This is kind of an example of the breeding that we target in terms of appearance. And because growers only make money when they can sell boxes, a big component of what we do is breed for yield and timing of yield. So all those things, size, appearance, yield, they're all a huge part of this. And these are just some examples of those things in action. So then, like I mentioned, we operate a very large plant pathology program. We recently revamped this program, and now we have one of the largest indoor disease screening facilities in the world for strawberry. We are annually testing at least 1,200 selections for multiple diseases, and actually the pathologist recently told me he thinks he can squeeze even more in now that he's gone to a new pot, apparently. And this program allows us to do a lot of things. We can do all the internal confirmation testing, which allows us to confirm whether or not our disease resistances are actually resistant, or if they were just flukes of a trial. We could do molecular characterization of these diseases and identification of our genotypes from a molecular standpoint. We're also providing industry screening services in California for anybody who grows our product. We allow them to submit samples to CVC if there are problems with them, and we identify those problems for them confidentially. So this is a service that we're providing as well as part of the breeding program that we're operating internally. So this is a picture of one of the greenhouses we do this in, and this is actually a drone shot of the outdoor disease trial. And this trial is growing apparently in size this year, according to our pathologist, by 4-fold. So this current season, it's 2 acres. We're going to go up to 8. And we're going to be screening a substantially larger set of our material in more replications outdoors from now on. And this is a list of all the things that we screen for. So from Fusarium to Macropomena, Verticillium, Phytophthora, and Colletotricum. And these are all the things we screen for in this plot trial. And we feel like this is probably the best way to get the data that we need that would relate to a grower. And the problem with this, of course, is that doing it in the field, even at 2 acres, I can only screen 500 individual plots. And that will only be 2,000 individual plots at 8 acres. And I can only do it once a season. So what we've done is we've gone ahead and expanded this, like I said, into a large greenhouse operation, which allows us to do preliminary screenings on the entire set of material. So every year we're doing something like 10,000 individual tests per building. The building's about a 5,000 square foot greenhouse. We're in the process of getting bids to build a second one to go ahead and expand this operation. And just to show you this, I mean, this is kind of a picture here of the disease screen process working. I can tell you in this particular photo if this was inoculated or a control. To me, it looks like a control at this point, but this is a picture the pathologist sent me. We also have pictures on the top here of the inoculum that's being made, and we're going to be making hundreds of gallons of this stuff a year, and just some kind of interesting photos of cut crowns, and things growing on plates. I thought they were kind of neat. So we do all this. We look for size and appearance and yield and pathology resistances or disease resistances. What this really is for us is a large data collection operation. And this process of collecting all this data every year is very intensive, but it allows us to drive population improvement, which results in the products that we make available. So each potential selection we have is observed for somewhere between 25 and 30 weeks. We take large sets of quantitative and qualitative data on this from things like yield, appearance, firmness, and size with scales or photography equipment and machine learning equipment. We also do things like qualitative things, like we measure the skin, the white shoulder issues, the tip issues, the seediness. All these things are measured multiple times a year over multiple years. And we conduct disease screening on these products as well in order to, one, have confidence in the products we do release, but also to move the population ahead. So just kind of by the numbers, each year we're doing about 1 million quantitative data points each year. So a scale and a technician are collecting at least 1 million data points a year on something like size or firmness or yield measures. We're taking about 750,000 data points on qualitative measures. Again, those are things like notes, things that can't be described by a scale. We're doing at least 4,000 field disease ratings historically, and those numbers are about to go up drastically. And I think one thing that's always interesting is about flavor. So how do you breed for flavor? And while we do collect Brix data on some of our material, Brix is only partially correlated with flavor or preference. So one of the ways we do this, so that we can confidently say things like Belvedere have very good flavor very often, is all these people in the shed, they all work for me. That's Adam, the plant breeder there, Don in the front left of the photo, some other staff. We all eat the fruit all season long. And we figure, we kind of put the math on the screen here if anybody wants to check it, that each of us is eating somewhere around 250 pounds of fruit a year. Those tasting notes become part of the qualitative data that allow us to move products forward for flavor. So what does all of this result in? And why does the grower or anyone in the industry really care? And it's because of this graph. Because in order to have improving products over time, the population of strawberry genetics must consistently improve. And this was Doug's philosophy, and is the philosophy of essentially every major plant breeding program in the world and every crop. And this is a very famous graph. And Doug actually allowed me to use part of this graph to use historical UC data that goes back to 1993. And you can see what this is showing is this is the average or annualized yield gain in the entire population from 1993 basically until 2012, the last year that there was a population at UC Davis. And this is pretty good. In that 20-year span, he more than doubled the yield potential. And since we've taken over and expanded the ability to do larger population sets and use more diverse genetic backgrounds, we've actually accelerated this pace, and now we're approaching an annualized yield increase of somewhere between 12 and 13% in the baseline of the population. And this is important because even though this is just the mean of the population, when the whole population moves up, it does mean that the edges of the curve move up as well. And this story repeats itself for all of our traits. We're able to push things like firmness, yield, timing of yield, appearance uphill like this over slow periods of time, which allows us to select better and better products kind of on the top end of the curve. So when we have a product, one of the things that we do that's important is we meristem and clean up these products. And this is just an example of something many of you have probably seen, meristems in a tube from our facility. Some of these, of course, do go to Australia to import products like Alturas and Belvedere. And this is a example photo of one of our screen houses where we grow screen house stock that is either destined for white tag production in our facility or being sold or exported to another country. So to date, this has resulted in 3 patents being officially confirmed by the US Patent Office. There are actually 5 still pending, basically just waiting for the government to do their job. And we'll talk about all of those products, or most of them, I should say. And then most of these are pending as PBRs, and some of them are actually done in Australia. So this is kind of the progress in the past 10 years from the vision to 3 fully patented products. And those are Adelanto, Belvedere, and Alturas, to several more in the works that are essentially just waiting for the paperwork. So this was kind of the stopping point right here. I just wanted to, let's see if I can close this. I'll close this and let's see if Sandy wants to come back.
I'm back. Yeah. Just as a quick interlude, if you wanna, yeah, take a breather, take some water. We have a question in the Q&A, and then I have a couple of questions that people have texted me, which guys, you can put it in the Q&A. I know it's easier to text me, but don't worry about it. So in the Q&A, we have a question about your taste testing.
Yeah.
Do you do any consumer testing? Any kind of general population testing?
So internally, we don't conduct taste tests, but some of our licensees, we have a product licensee out on the East Coast, in the East Coast of the United States, that does do this in a formal way. I would say products like Sweet Carolina, which is actually not a product we're going to import there, I don't think. They score in the top 15 or 20% typically in trials with 20 or 30 different selections in it. Belvedere has been a similar one out there, though it's not going to be repeated because as a short day, it doesn't really work in that market. So yeah, I mean, we think that taste preferencing and consuming stuff becomes a very large task, and we would like, of course, to do more of it. I hope that's satisfactory. There's another one here regarding size. Yes. So one of the things, so there's a question about regarding size and its relationship to firmness. Because as the fruits get heavier, this is obviously a concern. It's not just heaviness of fruit, I guess. It's also like whether or not it gets crushed with the clamshell lid. This is a problem. Where is the end of this? Where is the reasonable top to size? Fortunately, there isn't a strong link genetically between size and firmness. So as we go up in size, we're not like losing firmness as a general attribute in the population. Actually, the one in that photo is fairly firm. So it would take the bruising, we think.
Okay. And
And then,
kind of on that note, I know we've got another one in the Q&A, but I just wanted to interrupt because one of the texting ones was also related to that, which is size and yield, which is have you seen any decline in flavor as yield has increased and size increases? Have you seen any decrease in flavor?
no, not really. I mean, I think flavor is an elusive thing in strawberry, to be honest, which is why we eat so many of them. I would say that products like Alturas, they're competitive in flavor to products like Cabrillo. So we haven't really lost it, even though we've gone up 20 or 30% in yield. And there are other, but at the same time, you're absolutely right. There are products that take big yield steps, and they totally lose it. And this is kind of a balancing act in the breeding program: is where do you go and what don't you want to sacrifice? So one of our tenets here is to kind of push all traits uphill simultaneously and try not to lose them.
We've got the one about
Yeah, so there's the disease one. So
yeah, we
there's a
have
question
a
about
question because not everyone can see the Q&A. I'm just gonna recap if that's cool.
well,
Which is just in regards to when you're doing disease trials, do you assess the impact on yield in the disease resistance trials or just symptom expression?
so disease trialing at the large population level is just symptom expression. Yield trials begin at much later stages. and then of course we monitor this as well at the commercial level. And most of the products that we'll be talking about have been in California at a commercial level for a while. So I have quite a bit of feedback on those as we go through them.
Okay. And just because I happen to know this, you guys also interact with the larger Cal Poly trials as well, don't you? They're large
We
scale
do.
disease trials.
Mm.
So those are also independently verified. Yeah.
Yeah, so some of our material, like Adelanto and Belvedere, went through Cal Poly's Macrofamina trials. Actually, they were either the top two or the top three. And that is our experience with them as well in our trials. So we have some independent confirmation of that. And actually, we're doing more this year. Cal Poly's expanding this out to like heavily inoculated verticillium fields or old organic fields. And we submitted things like artesia to this program because basically nothing can grow in it, and they're going to be attempting to get some of our products to grow in it.
Which is very exciting, and I'm very excited to see those results. We have a question about nutrition, optimal fertilizer rates, but I think that'll actually be answered in the next section. Are you okay to kind of put that one on hold, or do you want to answer it now as a preview?
I will go over some of the fertility stuff as we go. And then the other one is no, I don't spray any hormones to increase size. So I have heard people do that. I'm not actually sure which hormone I would spray, but yeah, size is an easy one to breed, somewhat surprisingly. There's a lot of room in it genetically. So we see great progress when we put our thumb on the scale over there.
And then I have another one that was texted, which is a question about the main diseases that you're screening. There's no Neopastilidiopsis on that, and they were just curious as to why that's a big issue for Queenslanders in particular.
Right. So we don't do any neo screening because in California it's very quarantined to do it. We do have our material in with NC State in North Carolina, and those trials are actually being conducted for the first time this year on some of our stuff. But that's kind of a quarantine pest issue. They honestly they don't want us to be doing it here.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And then we have one more from the chat, which is basically asking do you basically what your marketable yield is, or do you assess marketable yield? So cull rate, they're asking about cull rates, how you take cull rates.
Yes. Yeah, so the yield data that I will present, I'll give you guys a little bit of a preview. So I'm going to go over the cultivars, not all of them, because to be honest, I think that might get a little monotonous. But I'll go over a couple of the key ones that are the most developed in your market and talk about a few that are coming right now that will be there very soon. Talk a little bit about the data we have on them, our experience with them. And then we're very happy at any point for anybody to submit questions to me or my kind of like VP of operations who handles really the grower management side of this stuff, who's 35 years he's been growing strawberries. And he can really fine tune stuff for people if they need it.
Yes. Do you want to push on? I can answer.
Yeah, I can.
The last one, murids are not a problem in California. So yeah.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. So that's not your circus, not your monkey. Shall we push on to varieties?
Yeah, let's keep going. Thanks,
right,
everybody. I
again.
really appreciate all the questions. It is nice to take a little bit of a break. It's a little late in the day for me, apparently. I feel a little tired. So, anyways, we carry on. All right. So, where's the next one? So, the patents and the products. So the first two that I will go over are products that have been there that I understand you guys have looked at a little bit or will be looking at more soon. This is Adelanto and Belvedere. And these are, if you remember back 25 or 30 minutes ago, if you can believe it's been that long, yeah, that picture of that little greenhouse, that little plastic one we set up in 2015, there were two seeds amongst the like hundreds of thousands of seeds we germinated that day that became these two products to show everyone the importance of a single seed and the process. So these products, Adelanto, We released Adelanto essentially because in California, in Southern California, places like Irvine and Oxnard, they were growing products like Radiance, and it's continued to the day to grow a little bit of San Andreas, even though it's a day neutral, they grow it for the early yield. And these markets, they have to have early yield or they just cannot be financially successful. So Adelanto is this product. It requires a fairly aggressive growing program to really get it going. And that'll be my first kind of comment about this from a grower management standpoint. So with Adelanto, the phrase that we use here, and because you have to transpose the seasons a little bit for yourself, but we would plant Adelanto here in Southern California sometime around October 1st, you know, and then we would want fruit on it by Christmas within 8 weeks. The way you have to do that with Adelanto is you have to push it. And you can push Adelanto a lot of ways, though. You can do it with clear plastic, like it is in this photo. You can do it in Baja, like they do in Baja with plugs, or you can do it under darker plastics with substantially more fertility than a lot of products typically require. So you have to push this plant. And we tell people that if you go out there on Christmas Day, 8 weeks or so, or 12 weeks or so after you've planted it, and it doesn't look too big, you're going to have a problem because the yield on this thing starts and it becomes very aggressive very early in how much bloom it wants to produce. And if you don't give it the fertility or the growth to move this product along, a lot of the fruit size will be lost. So key with Adelanto essentially is to figure out how to grow a big plant early. And there are many ways to do that. And even though we do recommend, a pre-plant allotment, that number really varies. It varies a lot based on growing conditions, plastic types, soil types. So I'd really rather give kind of like an anecdote like that. Make sure that you grow a big plant early. You don't have to grow a big one late, but early you got to get it moving. And when you do this, we are seeing consistently in California somewhere around 15 or 1600 grams in a season for us. And we're typically picking somewhere around 300, 350 grams by our cutoff for what we would consider the early market, which is somewhere in the first week of March. So that's very good for growers here. And when we move this product to Baja, which is focused on even an earlier planting, the weather is warmer, it's pure beach sand, so the fertility gets picked up. The product can be really pushed along, and Adelanto down there is this year it's going to be somewhere between 50 and 60% of the entire state of Baja in Mexico. So one of the other key things with Adelanto is it is resistant to Macrophyllina in all of our trialing, and that trialing was confirmed by Cal Poly. So this is just an example of this. This is Adelanto on the right. This is in our disease trial in Watsonville. That is Fortuna or Florida Radiance on the left, which is highly susceptible to Macrophyllina, which is a big problem in Southern California. So this is an important trait to have in a short day for us. So the other product, which to us is kind of the Porsche or the jewel in our short day lineup right now in terms of quality standards, is Belvedere. And of course, it's named that, because it is a high quality product to us. It, produces a substantial yield. Again, this is 4 years of data that you see here on Belvedere in this chart. And I understand this is being recorded, so I won't belabor every chart really at all. I mostly put this stuff up on here like I do on our field day handouts in California so that people who want to really look at the numbers can look at them, because these are our numbers. These are the numbers we make selection decisions on. So Belvedere, again, the management guidance with this is actually is kind of the opposite of Adelanto. It can be a bigger plant. So we don't recommend clear plastic. We want darker colored plastics. With just a standard, 200-300 pound pre-plant, if you do pre-plant at all. One of the things to watch with Belvedere is it does, like many products, benefit from a touch of in-ground chill before it is planted. So we find that the yield is still very good on Belvedere with basically a no-chill planting, which is what we do in Baja, but we get substantially better quality later in the season if we plant it in a place like Oxnard where it's just accumulated maybe 50 or 100 hours in the ground. Um, so we do like that about it. And again, these are kind of the photos and some Brix data. And you can see that in the Brix data, the average for Belvedere is fairly high at 10.6 over the course of the season. And just like Adelanto, Belvedere is resistant to macrophamina, and we actually believe it's slightly more resistant than Adelanto. Another key trait with Belvedere is its shippability. It is a product that some growers in California are finding that they can export a certain percentage of their fruit to like our basically the export market. So in California, we have an export market that goes places like the Middle East or Japan, and Belvedere is able to meet the arrival destinations because of how firm it is. So to kind of summarize each one for everybody with a little bit more modern comparison to products that people might be familiar with, I put together kind of this standard deviation chart on Adelanto, and would basically to read this chart, if there's a plus in a cell, what that means is that Adelanto is one standard deviation better than the thing it's being compared to. If there's a zero, it's basically statistically the same. Two pluses would mean it's two standard deviations above. So you can see here, like Adelanto really does have quite a bit more early yield than Fronteras, just like it does compared to the newer product from UC Davis, Victor, which is a good quality plant, but it is very late. And that does not work in a market that really needs to get yield on time. And this year, like I said, we're expecting quite a bit of sales of Adelanto coming out of California nurseries. This number is actually an advised number from probably months ago. This number is quite a bit higher now. We're expecting probably 70 or 80 million Adelanto to move out of McDowell, California this fall. So here in the next couple of months, and one of the things, again, I want to stress about it is it does perform well as a plug plant, and it doesn't require as much of the extra fertility when you do that. And there's quite a bit of this going on in Baja. And it's very quickly replacing Fronteras and the short day markets around here, as well as eating up the rest of the San Andreas market that was focused on kind of early yield, growing a day neutral as a short day, if you will. And then Belvedere, similar story with the chart, just for people that have it, kind of an easy way to look at the data. Belvedere is about a year behind in development from Adelanto. It was just the rollout of the clean stock started 1 year later. This year we are expecting somewhere still around 30, 35 million Belvedere to be sold out of California into California and Baja. Another 10 or 20 million out of central Mexico or out of southern Europe, where the product is also another year delayed because of like import requirements. And again, it's really moving. People are adapting it because of its excellent like long haul shippability and arrivals. It really is a firm product with good quality and good yield. That does arrive, and it's one of the things that kind of goes to one of the question about as we move up with yield, can we maintain flavor? And I think Belvedere is a good example of that product. I mean, it probably, with a good grower who is not necessarily focused on the most extreme early yield, Belvedere is a very solid product. It is still moderately early, and it will produce a very big yield. I would expect, when people really start figuring out how to grow it here, that we'll hear people getting between 1.6 and 1.8 kilograms per plant in a season in California. So that's kind of the 2 short days, and I know that these are available. So the next thing to transition into is another product that's really kind of quickly gaining traction. And I thought I'd take a little bit more of an interesting approach with Alturas, and give you guys kind of a little bit of a history and more of a deep data dive. So Alturas is the day neutral that we released a few years ago that is in Australia. It is very quickly replacing Cabrillo and Monterey here in California. So like I showed you the picture at the beginning of that barn with the cooler in it, that's the location where I initially saw Alturas. and selected it for the first time. So it was crossed in 2017, which would have meant I first observed it fruiting finally in Watsonville in the spring of 2019. And based on basically the second year trial results in 2020, that's when we decided to import Alturas into Australia under your quarantine process. So you can see here's the box that we take shipments of all the things that we send. This is the box from February 2021 where we imported Alturas along with some other products, CBC 16, CBC 18, and just for anybody who follows what we do, CBC 17 is Alturas. Apparently I took that photo back then. I found it in my photo roll just the other day. So I thought that was kind of cool. And so meanwhile, while we were waiting through the quarantine process, Alturas also competed in grower variety trials. And one of these we were really impressed with Alturas, and it's kind of when we really started pushing the gas on the increase in clean stock. It competed against 14 other trials, advanced day neutrals and grower trials in Watsonville that were from 3 different breeding programs. And I had just a couple selections in there. Alturas was one of them. And not only did it out yield all the competitors, but this goes to another question. It maintained the lowest cull rate. So we don't take cull rate on all like 25,000 selections, but we do it as the products begin to advance by collecting that data with growers on grower coordinated trials. So like this trial, it was a grower coordinated trial between 3 different breeding programs. And I believe the trials, if memory serves, were about 250 plants. They broke that down into 4 plots, I want to say, and took it. They did all the data collection. The data set is 100% from them. Basically, all we did every once in a while is go over there and look at it. So we're very pleased with this. And so Alturas at that trial has a very low cull rate, and that is the continued experience with it today. Is that even though today we're out at 1,000 acres of this in California, and we're well into the start of the peak right now this week, we're still seeing a very low cull rate, well below a few percentage points right now. I would expect that to drift up, to this 10 or 15% if we get some summer heat here, or if we get any weather events, some rain. It's rare that we get a rain event in Watsonville, but they do occur. That those always increase the cull rate some, but I've never seen the cull rate on it even after rain or 3 days of extreme heat jump beyond maybe a 20 or 25% strip one time. So one of the things we really like about Alturas is that's kind of the efficiency part of it. Is there are other varieties that may actually be out yielding it in total yield, but something like 20 or 30% of the fruit is going in the furrow. And I mean, any grower knows this. The easiest way to do this is to go in the field, sometime like now, a third of the way through the season, and walk the furrows. And you can walk Alturas's furrows still right now and not get strawberries stuck in your boots. So it really is impressive, basically, how much of the fruit is packable. Um, so, and this is, of course, today, while Alturas is basically the fastest growing day neutral variety in terms of percentage change year to year in plant sales ever. So we're very happy with this product, and a little bit deeper of a dive, or not deeper, just a better presentation perhaps of the data to show everybody how consistent the data is. So this chart summarizes the average grams per plant by month in our Watsonville trials over 4 years. All right. So you can see, Alturas is this kind of green bar, the slash line bars, that's like a standard error around the mean. And I've mapped like a line behind there to represent that standard error. So every one of the like bars is actually represented by somewhere between 36 and 48 individual data points by week that are then summed across how many ever weeks were in June that particular year. So this data set's very good. This kind of shows you what Alturas is doing in comparison to products like Cabrillo and Monterey in terms of total yield. And I believe I will show you how it's doing in comparison to those products in terms of other traits as well. And this is, of course, why this year, with its excellent yields, and it does have very good flavor. Most people are very impressed with it. I mean, the reviews on it in terms of that is it's at least as good as a product like Cabrillo. You know, it's very easy to harvest. And this isn't something, the funny thing, let me say this too. For anybody who's seen it anywhere in Australia, you have to go look down on the plant like the picker. That's what I mean by ease of harvesting, because actually the plant from the road looks like a fairly good sized plant. Um, you know, it's like globular presence or whatever is big, but it's a very open architecture plant, and you'll begin to observe that as you see how the crews and the crew foremen and the spray drivers work with the plant. And importantly for us here, it is very resistant to fusarium. So, and this is a kind of again one of the grower experience trials that we have. So this was the average yield in Watsonville across all acres from an individual shipper in 2024. So these numbers are the average values across, you know, probably 300 or 400 acres of Cabrillo, 1,000 acres of Monterey, 200 acres of San Andreas, and 200 or 300 acres of Alturas. You know, spread out across the Watsonville and Salinas district. These are the numbers reported by the cooler in terms of how much was booked at the dock. And I converted it into grams for everyone, but it is based on a pound weightage. So you can see that Alturas is really here, um, far out yielding these other products. And the predominant reason here, or not the predominant, but a large portion of the reason here is we do have bad fusarium in the Dana neutral area in California now. And none of those products like Cabrillo and Monterey are not resistant to fusarium. So they're losing 3, 4, 500 grams of their yield to the fusarium, where Alturas is simply not. But even in an even field where there is no fusarium, Alturas is still going to out yield Cabrillo by probably 15 or 20% in grams per plant. So, and then just a nice another photo for people of it actually in a grower's field that made up this data set for the past season. So this is actually just a picture that was taken this morning by the guys in the shed. I asked them to go pick it and harvest it. You know, comparing the products and kind of looking at them from Alturas, Brisbane, Cabrillo, and San Andreas. You know, Brisbane being another product from us, and it's actually one of the ones. Like I said, I'm not going to go into all of them because of kind of how monotonous it can be, but just to show people kind of what they look like, and you know, if you study it, you can kind of see how even Alturas is in comparison to even the other ones, even I guess even Brisbane. And this is just all the fruit from, I want to say 60 plants, put in a tray today, take a picture top down. That's what I asked them to do. So that's that one. And then a little bit deeper of a dive at the data. So again, I'm not going to belabor this, but I will point out a few things. So if we want to look at things like appearance, I'm sure your experience with Cabrillo is that the appearance is fairly good. Alturas, we think the appearance is slightly better. It's a lighter colored fruit and it doesn't get dark in the cooler. So, you know, our appearance scale runs from 1 to 5. 5 would be like the ideal or perfect berry according to the person who assigns it. So this is the data. Again, all this data is accumulated averages over 4 years. So that's appearance. Things like firmness. Alturas is actually a little less firm than Cabrillo, but it's about the same firmness as Monterey. And we don't really see any problems with it as long as growers stay on a typical 3 or 4 day harvest schedule, particularly if there's any heat events. But there really haven't been any complaints about the firmness. It all probably because it has decent skin. And again, this kind of goes to size. And this is one of the reasons that Alturas, you know, is more efficient to harvest, more efficient to fill clamshells, is because the size, not only is the end of season size, which is the bold number at the bottom, bigger, the 37.2, than all the others by quite a bit. It's kind of what it's still doing in months like July, where it is essentially during those like peak weeks at the end of July. It's still, or at the beginning of July, I apologize. It's still a decent sized fruit while the yield is really cranking. So it doesn't take as long to pack it so the farmers can get through it. So that's kind of a look at that. So that's Alturas, a new product that we're bringing to Australia, and we've released here in California as Castaic. This is formerly known as CBC 22. And we're releasing Castaic as a direct competitor to Fronteras. So it's kind of a main season short day. It's neither early nor late, is I guess how we would describe it. It basically maps the current Fronteras yield pattern in California, but it's out yielding it again somewhere. And I apologize. I know this one's actually in trays per acre. Um, I can convert that for anybody who asks me at the end. But this is, Castaic is out yielding a product like Fronteras essentially by 10 or 20% in all of our trialing, and perhaps even more in some areas in Santa Maria and in Oxnard. And Castaic may give Alturas a run for its money in terms of percentage plant sales increase because it is a very high yielding short day. It's very evenly colored, large, firm fruit, and firm being the key thing there compared perhaps to Fronteras. It doesn't have the skin slip issues or the color issues that Fronteras tends to develop in the heat at the end of the season. And it has a very low percentage of culls. And because of this, we're actually expecting to go from this season right now in the ground, we have just under an acre. This coming fall, we're planning for about 250 coming out of nurseries in California. And the nurseries are advising us that next fall that they plan to sell something like 3,000 acres or around 50 or 60 million plants. So it's moving very quickly. Growers are very quickly adopting this and replacing Fronteras with it. So this is a product that has been imported into Australia, and you'll be seeing from Tulane very soon. So then there's two more I wanted to go over, and that's it. So just another minute or two. So this is Alhambra, and Alhambra is a product that competes with something like Portola, a very strong day neutral that's designed for kind of the frigo planting or the summer plant planting. The takeaway message from this and is basically this: Alhambra has good flavor. And because of that, that's why growers are going to grow it in California, because Portola here in that system just does not. And the buyers complain about it all the time. So Alhambra is a very large improvement over Portola in both quality and flavor, importantly, very, very important in flavor. And this is data reported from the past summer plant season from a grower trial again that we conducted. It's actually comparing 2 acres of Alhambra to 2 acres of Portola. And you can see Alhambra really did substantially out yield Portola. I'm actually not sure that this will be everyone's experience. The Portola is moderately susceptible to Macrophomina, and Alhambra is not. Alhambra is actually resistant, or at least moderately resistant to Macrophomina, and I do believe this grower in Santa Maria may have had some Macrophomina, which would have suppressed the yield in Portola. And again, both of these, I apologize, are in trays, but really, actually, in summer plant, you could turn trays into grams because it was actually grams to begin with. It's projected into trays for growers in California. So this would be something around 1,200 grams for Alhambra, and something around 800 or something like that for Portola. So and then the one that has caused a little bit of a stir is Artesia. And this is the first product that we're releasing that's targeted to those growers. Again, like Rod Cota, like I mentioned in the beginning, the smaller growers that aren't necessarily yield obsessed, but they want quality. They want something that won't die. They want something that will ship, but they still need yield, right? I mean, they can't take those things and take half the yield that the guy next door is getting. So we released a product named Artesia. You have this in Australia. It has been formerly known as CBC 8. Artesia is extremely difficult to kill. That's the long and the short of it. It is at least moderately resistant or completely resistant to all 5 large soil and foliar-borne diseases in California that we look at. It is very firm, and it is picking in California in conventional settings. a yield, somewhere similar to Cabrillo or Monterey. So, somewhere around 3,000 grams is what we would expect to pick on those products per plant, and that's what we pick on Artesia. The difference is when we move Artesia to an organic field, particularly an organic field that has a history of even minor problems, it is far far out surpassing any other product that anybody can grow, because it essentially it just never dies. So this is the benefit, we think, of Artesia, and we think that growers who want to grow in an organic setting, we think of growers who have subpar fumigation or can't fumigate specific zones because of regulations. This doesn't make a compromise in terms of packable yield or quality, because the fruit is very high quality. And this is yet another product that we're finding a lot of growers, particularly early in the season, are using this for the export market, which typically is a very high quality, high flavor requirement. So with that, I just thought I'd show everybody a picture. This is a picture I took in my backyard a couple weeks ago of one of the selections I brought home from the test plot in Watsonville, with some beautiful flowers my wife grew in our garden at home. And this is a picture from McDowell, California, just from a few days ago, that the manager of Lassen Canyon sent me. This is actually a grow out of one of our new selections coming along at the High Elevation Nursery. So with that, I'll probably close the slide so I can see, because it's actually a little weird talking to all of you because I'm just staring at the slide. Yeah, and I'll take any questions.
Thanks, Kyle. That was fantastic. And we really appreciate you taking the time. I know it's late. And
Oh, it's not that, everybody. It's just yeah, just ignore me if I've been odd. So
oh no, it's all good.
there are some questions. I'll let you go through them and kind of whatever you want to do.
Yeah. All right. So we have a couple from early on about plastics and using plastics to control temperatures and
Yeah, okay. So plastic, let's be clear. So when I say plastic color, clear plastic, yeah, literally clear like a plastic bag, but it's the plastic on the bed, not like hoop plastic, the mulch plastic, I guess. Um, and benefits of clear. I mean, clear is substantially warmer, right? I mean, white is very, very cool. Um, so clear plastic is going to move things along, make them grow faster, maybe larger, which there are pros and cons to that. I actually don't know a lot of people in California still using white. They did it for a while in certain fields in California, but most of those aren't growing them because they're too hot. And I
the
do
dominant plastic
appreciate the
that we use,
Belvedere.
is black plastic for context.
Yeah. So I mean, most growers in California now are on black or green. Most people do not use clear. Clear is rare. Can't fight the weeds, right?
And we're on a similar schedule to you as well, in that we are limited to chlorpicrin and pictellone as well. So that's quite similar. And then I just wanted to give you a chance to catch your breath and also do some clarifications for people. So California calls the frozen plants that we use for summer plantings, California calls those frigo. You would have seen that on one of the slides. And just to remind everyone, these are flip seasons. So when he's talking about June and July, he's talking about summer season. When he's talking about January and February, he's talking about winter season.
Yeah, I apologize, everybody. I tried to transpose some of that in my mind, and I don't know how you guys do it. It's very confusing for me.
I have a spreadsheet. It's a long process. We have a question via text that is, do California growers still have methyl bromide? Which I know is a bit off topic, but it's
No. So in California nurseries, so like that nursery picture, for instance, in McDowell, the High Elevation Nursery, they still use methyl bromide, but no one else.
And we have another question about the variance, the fruit size variance. What are the major factors that influence it? And I guess my add-on to that would be like, what how much of a variance do you see in fruit size throughout the season for the more recent varieties? Like how much of a, for example, in particular here in Australia, we get some quite hot summers. So how much a reduction in fruit size are you seeing there during those very hot periods? Would be my add-on.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, fruit size obviously depends on time. Fruit tends to be in both the day neutral and a short day larger in the beginning of the season than the later part of the season. In our products, basically like all of them, they start large and they end somewhat smaller. Our goal essentially is to start at some kind of moderately large level and end at some kind of moderately medium level, right? Without variance across there. Products like Alturas do that very well. I would expect your experience to, I mean, if you pack in 1 pounders, you pack in like a clamshell, like a 500 pint.
We do a
Right?
250 and a 500 gram,
Mhm.
all clamshell most of the time. Some people do film, and
Okay.
most of it's single layer. We have more tumble pack coming on.
I mean, I would expect, compared to a product like Monterey or Cabrillo, to just think it's going to be one less fruit for every 500-gram punting, every pick, every week, all year round. That's what it's going to do. Like it's the whole kind of yield, the whole size curve kind of like just stepped up with a product like Alturas. Now with things like Belvedere, the product can be very large, particularly in the first 6 or 8 weeks. Sometime after the peak, the size can get kind of small. I have seen some growers, and I've been told by some growers they have some fertility practices that they do to try and mitigate that kind of like size drop off after the peak. Interestingly enough, it seems to always come back, after a week or two, so it's not much of a problem. Um, but yeah, that's kind of the variance. So we do monitor that. If somebody wants like real specific data on that, I would have to pull something out of our database. Um, but the charts that I put on here that people will be able to review, they do have like size data over time, so they can look at that.
Fantastic.
And
Um,
then and then yeah,
one more question. Is the data for the short day varieties based on Frigo or Fresh?
fresh.
Fresh. Yeah.
Everything like most of our data, besides the summer plant trial, the Frigo planting is all. It's essentially a bare root runner, a no leaf on bare root crown.
Well, I think we're gonna let you get back to the family, and
All
really
right.
appreciate you taking the time for us. And really appreciate you kind of kicking off this variety series. For everyone else, just so you know, this webinar will be uploaded to Berries Australia website, and you'll be able to view it any time. And I'll be sending a follow-up with some of the information that Kyle has laid out for us. With
Yeah.
yeah,
Let me say this. I mean, I really appreciate everybody's time. I know it's Friday at 1 o'clock now over there. I'm glad to know the world's still there tomorrow. Something to look forward to tomorrow morning. Um, I hope to make it out there soon. I'm working with George and Tulane, obviously, to bring our products there, and George really wants to get me out there. We are going to round ourselves up, get out there soon. So I hope to meet many of you out there, and if not, you're always welcome to come here. And anybody who really wants to dig into this stuff, I mean, one of the reasons I'm happy to present like the process, I actually like talking about it. So you want to come and talk to me about how this is done, what we're doing, look at the data together, just come knock. I'm here. So I'll leave it like that. And yeah, I'm gonna go wrangle, some number of my children that are running around in the background. I'm actually somewhat surprised they haven't come in here. So
we've had a good run.
yes, we've had a good run, and I appreciate everybody's time. It's been awesome.
Thanks, Kyle, and thank you everyone for coming.
All right, thanks, guys. Bye.